We continue our breaking news coverage of the passing of former Vice President Dick Cheney with NBC's Alice Barr in Washington. Alice, this news just breaking a few hours ago. But how do you think Washington is going to remember the former vice president?
Yeah, he really was a towering figure here in Washington. He's somebody who was kind of a stalwart of Washington politics. He held a number of positions, of course, most notably vice president, and he is seen as one of the most influential vice presidents in modern history. It's a funny role to be vice president. You're often trying to stay a step behind the president, but he really stood alongside President George W. Bush when he was his partner, and was often referred to really as a co-president, which is something that, of course, President Bush bristled against at the time. But that says a lot about how he's being remembered. So there are condolences, of course, flowing in today, and there are also reflections on what was a complicated legacy, because Cheney's also being remembered as an architect of the global war on terrorism and the second Iraq War, while serving, of course, as vice president to George W. Bush. And it was during that time that he really was a forceful presence in that Bush-Cheney administration, and he was seen as steering a lot of the decision-making towards saying that they believe there were weapons of mass destruction, of course, in Iraq, and then going in to begin that war that had, you know, really years and years of consequences to follow, and there never was evidence of weapons of mass destruction found. So that looms very large, certainly, over his legacy. He was also defense secretary under the senior President Bush. He was a defense hawk at that time as well. And before that, he was a U.S. representative from Wyoming. So again, a long history in Washington politics, and one that certainly left a big imprint during his time here. Yeah,
powerful and polarizing, as I've heard it described this morning. He was also at one point defending his daughter Liz Cheney as she was examining Donald Trump's actions surrounding the 2021 insurrection at the Capitol. So what kind of response can we expect from the White House today, if any?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. You know, Liz Cheney, the daughter of Dick Cheney, was one of the most outspoken, has been one of the most outspoken Republican voices against President Trump. She was part of the investigative team of his second impeachment, and she spoke really loudly and forcefully about feeling that he was not the right person to lead the Republican Party. That's something that certainly President Trump has bristled against many times and has spoken out against Liz Cheney. She's no longer, you know, went from being the number 3 member of leadership in the Republican House to not being a member of the House after President Trump campaigned against her. And toward the end of his life, you know, this person who was such a towering conservative figure, Dick Cheney, he actually said that he was going to vote for Kamala Harris in the last presidential elections, you know, standing alongside his daughter Liz Cheney, who actually campaigned with Kamala Harris in the lead up to the last election. So we haven't heard yet from President Trump. You know, he doesn't always take kindly to people who are very outspoken against him. So I'll be interested and now be watching to see if there is a response.
Yeah, Alice, I know it's still early, but are we hearing anything yet on a state funeral or any kind of memorials for him in the coming days there in the nation's capital?
Yeah, I haven't gotten details on that yet, but I do imagine that there will be, you know, a great deal of honoring of his memory. Again, interesting to see how that plays out, depending on how President Trump may respond and whether that has some kind of an influence on the kind of memorials that we see for him here in Washington. But again, really a towering and influential, as you said, a powerful and a polarizing figure here in Washington.
Yeah, Alice, we know you'll keep us apprised of things as you hear them. Thank you so much for this report.